Hello, my name is Keith Gill, and I'd like to welcome you to Part 5 of this continuing lecture series titled The Ultimate Seeds, an Illustrated Guide to the Secret of the Universe. Now, to start this off, I would like to pick up on a theme that I stressed not only in Episode 4, but all through this series, and that is how incredibly natural the secret of the universe is. As I have asserted over and over again, we are the literal embryos of God. Now, I'm talking about our minds or our inner spirits now, which are momentarily held within the cosmic womb of God's advanced being, meaning the universe, awaiting our second and final birth into our true eternal form outside of His womb, meaning outside of our bodies and literally outside of the universe itself. Now, obviously, the very idea that we are God's gestating offspring floating around in the universe, metaphorically kicking and thrashing about in the ethereal amnios of His reproductive system, presents a vision of reality that is absolutely drenched in nature, taking the concept of nature itself to an entirely new level. Now, envisioning ourselves in a fetus-to-parent relationship with God should give us a deeper understanding of the often stated spiritual concept that God is closer to us right now than we are to each other. Because how much closer can we get to God than to have our minds or spirits literally wrapped in the very substance of His being in a placental-like encapsulation? That's right. Relative to our true eternal spirit form, our bodies are nothing more than placenta that will be discarded upon our final birth. Now, to understand this even further, I need to get a little more graphic with this placenta analogy. First of all, we all know that in the human reproductive system, the physical embryo or fetus sits within its mother's womb, surrounded in amniotic water, which is all encased in a placental sac or membrane. Now, this placental membrane forms the juncture that unites the body of the fetus to the body of its mother. And through this juncture, the fetus receives sustenance from its mother. Now, when the fetus reaches full term, there is a breach or break in the placental membrane, and the baby then exits the closed and all-encompassing world of its mother's womb and is delivered into the light of a new world, where it is now a separate and viable entity unto itself, existing independent of its mother in a form that resembles her. Now, furthermore, a few moments later, the placenta itself is also delivered out of the mother's body as, if I may get technical here, a glob of bloody visceral tissue that is either incinerated or disposed of in some proper manner, never to be reckoned with again. Now, that is a general metaphor for our present and impending situation relative to God. For you see, just as our physical embryo was united to our mother's physical body through that placental juncture for 9 months in her womb, so our spirit embryo is united to God's spirit body through this placental juncture for 70 or so years within His womb. And when there is a breach in this placental membrane through the event that we call death, our spirit consciousness will then exit the closed and all-encompassing world of God's womb and be delivered into the light of true reality, where we will be separate and viable spirit entities unto ourselves, existing independent of God in a form that resembles Him. Now, the only place where this placenta metaphor breaks down is the point where, after the spirit is born out of God and into true reality, this placenta does not follow it out a few moments later. Why? because it literally cannot leave. The reason for that is something that I talked about extensively in my discourses on quantum theory. At the subatomic or quantum level of the universe, or the very foundation of what we call objective reality, the wave-like correlated patterns of energy and information that form this holographic-like object that we call a body are inextricably united or phase entangled with all of the other patterns of energy that form every other object throughout the universe of God's mind. And because of this seamless phase entanglement at the quantum level, nothing that we call matter, and this applies only to matter now, not spirit, nothing that we call matter can ever leave the closed dimension of God's consciousness. And for an easy way to visualize this, all you have to do is remember our lessons concerning the laser hologram, and then realize that trying to separate these bodies from the informational matrix of God's consciousness and from the other objects within His universe would be like trying to separate this key here from the hologram, leaving the die and paperclip behind. Now, if you will just think back to what we learned regarding the seamless interpenetration of the information that underpins the three objects in the photographic plate, and that no matter how far you break the plate down, the three objects keep appearing in the broken pieces, and furthermore, how this phenomenon was a metaphor for the foundation of our minds and the mind of God, then you will realize what an impossible feat it would be for the body or any other material object to disentangle itself from the subatomic realm and then exit the universe. It is forever held within the bounds of God's own personal subjective reality. And once again, this applies only to matter, not spirit. Our spirits can and will exit the universe. Now, another quick and easy way of viewing this would be to look into a human mind and realize that just as the holographic-like image of an apple or a globe of the earth, for instance, cannot be disconnected from the other images in that mind in such a way that would allow it to exist on its own, outside and independent of the mind and consciousness that created it, likewise, neither can the super advanced images of our bodies exist outside and independent of the consciousness that created them. They literally have no existence or reality independent of God's mind. And that is why the placenta is not delivered into true reality along with the newborn spirit to complete the metaphor. It stays here in God's universe and carries on in conjunction with the order that God has established within His own subjective realm. In other words, we take it and put it in a tomb or a mausoleum or something, and then visit it periodically with flowers and incense. Now, the point to which I have been leading in this incredibly strange metaphor was emphasized in episode 4 when I snuck in a quick video shot of a cemetery and called it a fancy placental repository. Well, ultimately, that's the truth. All cemeteries on Earth are just that, fancy placental repositories, or, if you will, gardens of afterbirth. The point being that if we could view this activity of enshrining dead bodies in elaborate and expensive memorials, if we could view it from the perspective of our true eternal form in true reality, looking back at the universe, it would be the metaphorical equivalent of going into the obstetrics ward of the hospital and taking the afterbirth, that glob of bloody viscera, out of the delivery room and enshrining it in a memorial to the newborn baby out in the nursery. And that would be weird. Now, obviously, because we are not privy to that blessed event taking place in the big delivery room of true reality, we are not aware of the fact that we're doing something weird by enshrining corpses. And furthermore, I am not suggesting that we need to make radical changes in our memorial system either. I am merely attempting to point out some interesting, high-level irony as seen from the perspective of true reality, the ultimate of which would be the Egyptian pyramids. If you will just consider the tremendous human effort that went into building those gargantuan monuments just to store that tiny little glob of gnarled and leathery afterbirth that we call a mummy, then you should get a sense of the irony I'm talking about. Especially when you realize that the spirits of the pharaohs and the spirits of the workers who were forced to labor on the pyramids are all of equal status and potential in true reality as the offspring and siblings of God. Now, of course, my calling cemeteries gardens of afterbirth is not intended to trivialize the death of a loved one, nor to defile their memory. It is meant to herald the incomprehensible glory of their birth into their true eternal form, and to demonstrate by analogy, which is the ultimate point of this placenta metaphor, to demonstrate by analogy the tremendous leap in significance of the next dimension as compared to this one. Because when something as incredible as the human body can be considered as being placental afterbirth, a glob of tissue to be discarded, how wondrous then must our true form be? You must always remember where I am coming from with this. The frame of reference here is eternity in true reality, not our transient little gestation period within the universe itself. Now, as strange as all of the preceding may have sounded, my intention here is twofold. First, to impress upon you once again how truly natural the secret of the universe is. The metaphor of God being pregnant with us cannot present a more poignantly natural vision of reality. And the second part of my intent is to set the premise for this next illustration. Now, this is just a very abstract representation of the three stages of our existence that I've just been talking about. This first rectangle here symbolizes the 9 months we spend as unconscious fetuses floating in the amniotic water of our mother's womb. This next larger rectangle symbolizes the 70 or so years we spend as semi-conscious humans floating in the ethereal water, so to speak, of God's womb. And this last rectangle symbolizes the eternity we will spend in true reality in our fully conscious, fully revealed spirit form. Now, to understand the perspective of the scale represented here, if you can just imagine the other end of this rectangle stretching off camera and then out beyond our solar system, beyond the Milky Way galaxy, through the 20 billion light-year expanse of the universe, past the light barrier boundary of the universe itself, and then out into absolute infinity, you will then get some idea of the size of this rectangle compared to the others. And the point is that this is the scale by which we can measure the significance of the next dimension compared to this one. Now, what I'm trying to convey to you is the understanding that true reality and the form we will acquire therein is so incredibly advanced relative to this form and reality that once we are born into it and have spent some serious time there, our perspective of our stay within the universe will be a higher dimensional equivalent of the same perspective that we have right now regarding our stay in our mother's womb. It will be something that was meaningful at the time, but will no longer be of any concern to us. Now, what all of that ultimately implies, and I said I was going to get graphic with this placenta metaphor, what it all implies is that everything that seems so important to us right now, meaning all of the circumstances of the entire human experience within the cosmic womb of God's universe, and that includes all of the physiological, psychological, sociological, and even theological circumstances, are nothing more than the metaphorical equivalent of amniotic water that will run down God's leg when the placenta breaks. Now there's a vision for you. Not to mention the mother of all anthropomorphic images. But remember, I said in episode 4 that I wanted to explore the philosophical implications of the ultimate seed concept to see what it really meant to us here on Earth. Well, like it or not, the implications are profound when it comes to de-emphasizing the importance of human matters within the universe. The problem is that the ideas I am promoting are so vastly out of context when viewed from our present perspective that they sound ridiculous. And that is the problem I've been confronted with throughout this entire series. Because I am speaking as if we were all positioned out here in true reality, perhaps billions of years into the future, looking back at our stay within the universe. And many aspects of this outer dimension are indeed out of context when viewed from within this dimension. In the same way that many aspects of this dimension, meaning the world and the universe, are out of context when viewed from within this dimension of our mother's womb. For example, you would not make an incision in the abdominal wall of a pregnant woman and then take the key to a shiny new Corvette and place it in the hand of the fetus within her womb. The fetus has no use for that key in its present state of mind and physical condition, for it is totally unconscious of that inaccessible outer dimension where the Corvette sits, and it will only do damage to itself and the general order of the womb by poking and thrashing the key around. Even though that Corvette key corresponds with a true aspect of this outer dimension, it represents a higher level of consciousness and reality to which the fetus is yet to be born, and is completely out of context within that womb. The key has no business being in the hand of the fetus, and we, as caring stewards of the well-being of our progeny, would not place it there either. Now the same thing applies to the universe and God's caring stewardship over His progeny. There are realities of this outer dimension that, if placed in the hands of humans and viewed out of context, would only damage and disrupt the general order of God's womb. And as incredible as it may sound, especially in light of the subject material of this lecture series, absolute knowledge of our ultimate destiny is one of those potentially damaging realities that has no business being known to us while we function in the universe. And because of that, God does everything He can to prevent us from obtaining it fully. Only when we complete our second and final birth through the process that we call death will the truth be absolute for us. So in other words, what I am saying is that for our own good, like us keeping the Corvette key out of the hands of the fetus, God purposely keeps us in the dark, so to speak, in kind of an all-encompassing veil of unconsciousness that literally obscures not only true reality from us, but also God Himself. And what I am furthermore saying is that this veil of unconsciousness to which I am referring is the veritable linchpin of the universe. And understanding why it exists will help to answer many questions regarding God's motives, including why He does not reveal Himself and end the suffering and madness of the world. Now, the best way to understand why the veil of unconsciousness is so important for our well-being is by understanding what would happen if it were to be removed. To do that, I need to create a fanciful little scenario for us. Okay, just imagine, if you will, the consequences if shortly following birth all human beings gained full and definitive knowledge that their lives would continue on forever following the termination of their bodies. And not just continue on, mind you, but blossom into glorious, super-conscious beings completely free from the sufferings one might endure while on earth. Imagine there being something like a universal window in the form of, say, a sliding glass patio door, through which every human on earth could literally see their departed friends, relatives, and loved ones still alive in a wondrous new form and setting, summoning us to join them. In addition to that, imagine God giving us an open choice that says we can either experience agonizing struggles against seemingly insurmountable odds in order to stay alive for just a few extra moments on earth, or we can enter into a realm of unbelievable beauty and eternal life in our true form just by opening the sliding glass door and stepping across the threshold. Now, which do you honestly think you would choose if indeed either choice was perfectly okay with God? Well, the fact of the matter is, and I am out here about to say something totally out of context, the fact of the matter is that either choice is perfectly okay with God. But that's the point. He cannot let us know that for certain. That is one of those damaging truths that absolutely must be kept hidden from us. Because if God did not hide it, here is what would happen. I get a cold with an incredibly bad sore throat, stomach cramps, and nausea. I'm out of here. I am through the door. Or I am a confused teenager who just broke up with my girlfriend, and I cannot go on without her. I'm crossing that threshold. Or someone I love dearly is already on the other side, and there's nothing good on television tonight, so I think I'll join them. Do you get the picture? The choice of whether to stay on earth or to enter into heaven cannot be made to appear simple or frivolous. Why? Because it is imperative that humans stay on earth long enough to perform a couple of very important jobs. The first job is mandatory, meaning we have no choice in the matter, and that is to be born. That one was easy. Just receive the gift of life from God. The second job is optional, but requires some effort, and that is to be part of the same reproductive system that facilitated our first job. In other words, us old fetuses have to help make new fetuses via the same process that made us. Now, the point is that both of these jobs require that somebody, emphasis on the word body, spend some time here in objective reality. However, if everyone is jumping through that doorway, opting for paradise because God let us see the truth, then we have a problem. Humans long ago would have found a quick and easy way of exiting physical reality when life on earth got a little too tough, and that, as they say, would be that. If the ultimate truth of our destiny was not hidden from us, then rest assured there would not be 6 billion of God's gestating offspring alive and well on planet Earth today. You would not be watching this video because you and I would not have received the gift of life. Human procreation on this orb of reality would have ceased from the very beginning. So, as silly as this may sound, absolute knowledge of the afterlife in the hands of humans would be tantamount to giving God a hysterectomy. Now, in conjunction with why the afterlife cannot be fully revealed to humans, the same goes in answering the question, if God really exists, and if he truly cares for us in a parent-to-offspring-like relationship, why then doesn't he fix all of the problems of the earth? Why must there be so much pain, suffering, and confusion? To understand the state of the world, you must first understand the nature of the veil of unconsciousness that God imposes on us. To do that, I want you to think of the veil that hides heaven from us as being similar to the situation we often encounter when we are engrossed in a vivid dream. When we dream, sometimes it can seem so real to us that we do not realize that we are dreaming until we finally awaken from it. Such is the case with our situation here in the universe, only at a much higher level, of course. We are momentarily held within the bounds of a dream-like illusion. Not a dream, mind you, just a dream-like illusion that looks and feels so convincingly real to us and is so captivating of our attention that we do not realize that there is a higher stage of wakefulness above and outside of the dream itself. And if you have any doubt of the idea that humans are indeed somnambulants, walking around in a sleep-like condition, never forget what I talked about in episode 1. We are standing on a spinning orb of concentrated light-like energy, mental energy, floating through the ether of God's consciousness. The fact that humans seem to be oblivious to the utter strangeness of just the ordinary everyday reality of giant oceans and great human metropolises all twirling around topsy-turvy in a 24-hour rotisserie cycle is testament to the lengths to which God has gone to subdue our general awareness. Now, the point is that it is very important that we do not wake up from this dreamlike condition prematurely, so to speak, in some wide-scale and overwhelming spiritual aberration or event that might in turn evoke the sliding glass door scenario, where we become vividly aware of the afterlife. Now, one of the means by which God ensures the integrity of the illusion of objective reality is by not interfering in human affairs in ways that might appear blatantly supernatural. Everything that happens in the universe, all evolutionary-like changes on Earth, whether they be material or spiritual, must occur in ways that make sense and appear regular natural to us, so as not to startle us awake in some abrupt slap to our awareness. Take, for instance, the death of the dinosaurs. To end the era of the dinosaurs, which, by the way, the length of which was necessary for creating, in a natural-appearing way, the vast stores of fossil fuels responsible for ushering in our modern age, we would not have cars and computers without it. Again, to end the era of the dinosaurs, to make way for us, of course, God could have used an asteroid or some other natural phenomenon to do the job. What do you think he would do? Come down to Earth and stomp on them? We're back to anthropomorphism again here. However, can you just imagine the situation where, from the very start of the science of paleontology, all dinosaur bones on Earth were discovered to have been crushed and lying in the middle of giant footprints created by feet for which there is no detectable source? Consider the problems that would cause us Earthlings wondering whose big feet stomped out the dinosaurs. Was it God's? Was it some space alien? Is it coming back to stomp on us? You see now, that type of obtrusive mystery would be a major disruption to our perspective of the naturalness that the Earth exudes for us, and would tend to tilt our consciousness perhaps a little too far toward the ethereal realms, creating conditions that might cause problems in maintaining the integrity of this illusion. So by concluding that the dinosaur's demise was a natural occurring situation, we are able to keep our mental focus more down to earth, dedicated to our jobs of subduing it and making babies under more tenable circumstances. Now, the point is that the delicacy of the veil that separates the illusion of the universe from the real thing, so to speak, makes it important that not only nothing happens on Earth that might cause us to doubt the integrity of objective reality whenever we study its features and origins, but also, and this is the ultimate point, also requires the inclusion of additional stringent measures in order to help keep our minds in check. And some of the stringent measures to which I am referring are the very aspects of the earth that humans think God should be fixing. Now, I do not mean to sound calloused or unfeeling in what I'm about to say, because remember, I am speaking from out here, telling truths and secrets that are totally out of context back in here, and not really meant for the fetus who is not ready for it. However, realize once and for all that just as our physical embryo was not meant to stay in our mother's womb forever, likewise our spirit embryo is not meant to stay in the universe, in God's womb forever. We simply must exit these placental membranes sooner or later, one way or another. And diseases, cancers, heart attacks, famines, floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, pestilences, accidents, terrorist acts, murders, wars, you name it, as horrible as they may appear to us from this perspective, are merely different means of metaphorically breaking God's water, so that our spirits can be delivered into true reality and awaken into our ultimate form. And once again now, I am not intending to sound cavalier about death or human misery. I get just as upset as anyone upon losing a loved one or seeing someone suffer. Nevertheless, viewing the universe from this vast outer perspective, I have no choice but to conclude that most of the conditions that humans perceive as being defects of the world are actually necessities of the system. Now, to help understand what I am getting at, allow me to quote from my first book, A Little Book Open, Voice of the Seventh Angel. First of all, there is nothing wrong with the earth. Everything is working according to design. The problems we experience are mostly related to human attitudes toward each other. And these are problems that we need to solve ourselves. God cannot come down to earth at the drop of a hat and literally reveal himself or the absolute truth of his existence on a regular basis to the world every time something appears to go wrong. That would have the same effect as wrenching aside the veil and vividly revealing the afterlife. He must stay pretty much out of the picture in order to maintain the incredibly fine-tuned illusion he has created with the earth and universe. The universe is a mentally produced illusion that is so intricately designed and so remarkably well done that it deters those who reside within it not only from realizing that it is an illusion, but also from thinking that there could possibly exist anything other than the illusion. And a great deal of the illusion's strength, in other words, its power to enthrall and captivate us, comes from the sources we consider to be the problems. The pain and suffering and general human foolishness, all of the imperfections of the world that we think God should eliminate, are actually some of the features that make the material dimension so convincing and believable. Why? Because they make us question God's existence. And besides the awesomeness of the universe, what is the single most ongoing situation that seems to convince humans that God and the afterlife may not exist? It is the fact that there is so much misery on earth, and God doesn't come along like the caring parent we think he should be, pick us up, wipe our snotty noses, and then set things straight for us. But you see, the element of doubt as to God's existence and our destiny is exactly the effect that God is after. For it is that veil of uncertainty draped across the threshold of death that makes us want to experience life on this side of the veil on earth to its fullest. And that is the point. That's what God wants us to do. He wants us to experience and manipulate the constituents of this level of reality to the fullest degree, unhindered by any overriding awareness of a higher level of reality that might in turn detract from the intensity with which we apply ourselves to this level. And it is the not knowing of the certainty of eternal life and the superconsciousness that follows death that produces the inherent resolve in humans not only to endure immeasurable hardships in order to survive and procreate on earth, but also to accomplish all that can be accomplished while on the planet. Now, the point being that the illusion of objective reality, with its primary purpose of awakening new eternal souls into life, could not operate at 100% without the inclusion of the general array of negative circumstances that befall humans. Now, of course, there will be those who will insist that there must be a better way for God to do this without humans having to suffer. However, one of the easiest ways to figure out why the universe is the way it is to try to imagine a different way. How would you do it? First of all, let's consider the phenomenon of physical pain, one of the key ingredients of human suffering and fear. What is the purpose of pain? Certainly we could do without that now, couldn't we? Well, the bottom line is that pain is our personal incentive program to protect our bodies from any injury that might in turn affect our chances of staying alive on Earth in order to reproduce. Our extreme sensitivity of touch throughout our bodies, which creates one of the rich sensory interfaces between our minds and God's mental holography, requires a suppleness, delicacy, and softness of our bodies and skin that if we were not strongly compelled to protect it, would constantly be damaged. Children who are born with no ability to sense pain are always slamming themselves around, breaking bones, and causing life-threatening internal damage that they are often unaware of. And that is not conducive to longevity. So you see, pain is an essential and powerful warning system for us for when things go wrong with our bodies so that we are forced to take measures to keep them in good repair. Now, in view of that, some may ask, why should anything go wrong with our bodies, or anything else for that matter? Because if God is powerful enough to create the universe and this incredible Earth-Sun system, why can't he keep things from going wrong? We're back to the believability factor again. Because in light of the dynamic system of reality that we operate within, what would you have happen when two cars collided in an accident? Should we and the cars just bounce around totally unscathed? What would our bodies have to be made of under those conditions? Should cars never collide? Should no one ever fall down and skin a knee? Should every human ever born on Earth live to be 90 years old, never having encountered one unpleasant moment, and then just pass on peacefully in their sleep? Now that may sound nice, but would it really work to produce a convincing and believable dimension of reality to the degree to which we believe in this one? A dimension that by its very design has already awakened billions upon billions of God's offspring into eternal life from just this one planet alone. Now, keeping in mind the fact that what we refer to as being the objective reality of the universe is actually the closed subjective reality of God's living consciousness, there's something that must be understood regarding our role in the creation processes taking place within it. And that is, even though God did indeed create the Earth-Sun system that made it possible for the manifestation of our living souls, he is not literally creating our earthly civilizations for us. We are creating them. It is our billions of busy little minds and hands indirectly manipulating the constituents of his mental holography into the intricate lattice work that we call civilization. We perform the detail work that shapes the conditions that we feel are necessary for our comfortable existence on this tiny ball floating through the ether of his mind, while God provides us with the ingredients, tools, and setting, and yes, even the divine guidance necessary to manifest those conditions. And to understand how this works now, realize that because everything that we call reality, subjective or objective, is mental energy capable of becoming anything imaginable, all we have to do is to use our minds as templates for the ideas of how we would like our civilizations to develop, and everything we need to transpose those ideas into the higher level reality of God's mind is incorporated right into the earth itself. And if you doubt that, just look around you and envision the almost infinite array of inventions and material manifestations that form the functional basis of the world's societies, and then realize that practically every one of those creations began as an idea in the mind of a human. God has not only provided us with a stable orb of reality on which we can flourish, but included with this orb is almost every possible ingredient necessary to allow us to transform the mental constructions created from the substance of our own minds into the amplified versions of those constructions out of the similar substance of his mind. And furthermore, to top all of that off, he has now given us quantum physics, which means that anything that God has not initially provided as a natural substance woven into the fundamental fabric of the Earth's informational matrix or its quantum realm, he now allows us to create it ourselves by using the mathematical formulas of quantum mechanics. Now, I talked about this in depth in episode 2. It just means that we are now able to create new designer clays of creation out of God's original clays by accessing and reconfiguring his mental holography at the subatomic or informational level itself. Like reaching into the photographic plate of the hologram that I've talked about so often and changing the patterns of information at the implicate level so that something entirely new and different can appear for us up at the explicate level. That's why we now have such things as atomic energy, computers, television, lasers, superconductors, just to name a few, with no end in sight as to the infinite creative potential that we now possess over God's mental holography. Again, everything is mental energy capable of becoming anything imaginable, within the bounds of propriety, of course. Now, the point to which I have been leading with all of this is that the degree to which we commit ourselves with God to this joint creative effort that we call life on earth is dependent and proportional to the degree to which we believe this dream, this illusion, to be real. And you see, as I speak these words, I absolutely know that many people will think to themselves, what is this guy talking about? Of course this is all real. And that is exactly what I'm talking about. That level of conviction as to the certainty of the earth is what makes the universe work. The viability of God's reproductive system teeters on the strength of that conviction. The wide spectrum and intensity of emotions, from the most negative to the most positive, that comes from humans taking themselves and this earthly situation so seriously, is what gives the world such a vibrant sense of reality. Our emotions are the spices that give the living drama its rich flavor as the earth progresses through time. And for God to start making drastic changes in the physio-illusional realm just to make it softer on us would only tend to dull and disenhance, perhaps even nullify, the profound and extemporaneous stories taking place on earth. I am talking about living stories. Elvis, Joan of Arc, Einstein, Ed the janitor, Cleopatra, Adolf Hitler. Living stories with roles acted out by humans as a direct result of the absolute believability of situations within the physical dimension. We are each an individual living story that is being spontaneously self-written by the choices we make and how those choices intermesh and intermingle with the choices others make within the infinite range of possibilities unfolding in the holographic-like mental arena of God's living consciousness. We are all unwitting participants in God's real dream, as I described it in episode 4. A dream that God has constructed in such a way as to literally create new dreamers just like himself, and will continue to do so as long as the new dreamers continue to perform their respective roles in the creation process. Now, the ultimate point is that by not realizing that we are engrossed in a vivid dream-like reality from which we will all eventually awaken, it allows us, the naive innocence, to play to the hilt whatever role we may momentarily find ourselves in. Gender role, race role, villain role, saint role, fool role, genius role. Whatever it may be, we give stellar performances in our roles because we are caught up in the dream and we believe them. Our gender roles, for instance, which are at the very heart of God's reproductive system, and indeed our most important roles of all, are truly dependent upon low consciousness and a blind acceptance of the illusion. For you see, our true form that will be revealed to us upon death is a genderless wholeness of being, as is God's form, which means that all of our spirits are absolutely identical in structure and purpose. Any one of us at this very moment could be occupying either a male or female body of any other race or societal circumstances on the entire planet, and it would not make one bit of difference as to the role play itself, nor to our ultimate outcome. However, the point being, it is the veil of unconsciousness, along with the perfection of God's creative power over His mental holography, that has resulted in these wonderful temporary facades that not only produce the illusion of differences between us when in fact there are none, but is also responsible for the intense attraction between the sexes. An attraction that leads to the bonding that ultimately leads to the deep supernatural mechanism that God has established for the awakening of new eternal souls into life. This is how He does it. This is how new souls are literally conceived. Not all souls all at once in some magic moment in past eternity, but fresh and new, one at a time, through the advanced informational processes of an unthinkable level of order that God has created in and of Himself in the form of what we call a universe. We then stay in His universe just long enough in a logical appearing progression of our placental facades from infancy to old age for the sake of the illusion, in order to bring new and subsequent souls conceived through us to the point where they can carry on the same process themselves. We, meaning our spirits, are then born out never to return again. All of which takes place in only 70 trips of the earth around the sun. Not a big deal for an eternity of life in paradise. So you see now, every aspect that God has incorporated into the universe, from our attenuated and subdued level of consciousness to the problems and misunderstandings we experience as a result of our attenuated consciousness, to His not intervening in those problems in blatantly supernatural ways, to its colossal size and bizarre, frightening attributes, down to its most trivial details, such as useless meteorites drifting through the ether of space, all conspire together to enhance and perpetuate the illusion of objective reality in order to keep us focused in on down-to-earth realms of activity during our short stay within it. Again, making babies. So realize now that as we stand out here and view the universe from the eternal perspective, as far as we are concerned, everything happening within the universe, besides the birthing events of God's offspring, are just transient incidentals. The flotsam and jetsam of the ethereal amnios of God's cosmic womb. And once the messy and painful birthing process is completed, and that final contraction and push that we call death has delivered our spirits into the light of true reality, we will look back at the universe and understand that things had to be the way they were, negative aspects and all, in order for the system to work properly. And once we realize that no one really dies, and that all of our siblings' dark and malevolent actions on earth were the result of the general low level of consciousness that God Himself imposed upon us for the sake of order, then the forgiveness of God and the forgiveness we will have for each other will be absolute for everyone, with no exceptions. Now, in case you haven't already figured it out, it is obvious that I have implied that the veil of unconsciousness is a double-edged sword. Because along with the impetus we receive to push ourselves to the heights of great accomplishments and happiness on earth comes the downside of the dream metaphor, where humans descend into nightmarish realms of consciousness, characterized by what we think of as evilness and brutish behavior. Racism, for instance, is the perfect example of extremely low consciousness and the blinding effects of the veil. Humans who are caught in the throes of racist thought truly walk in a realm of mental darkness that affords them no spiritual light and no comprehension of their ultimate being. The power and perfection of the dream is just too overwhelming for them. Metaphorically speaking, of course, some of us are light sleepers and hover closer to the threshold of awakening from the dream, corresponding with higher consciousness and spirituality. While on the other hand, others of us are heavier sleepers, corresponding with lower consciousness and a deeper enchantment by the material illusion, which in turn leads to the conduct that can appear as evilness when viewed from a higher frame of reference. However, realize once and for all that all evil is or ever was is low consciousness and the actions resulting from it. Just a deeper level of somnambulism in the big dream. Now, I will discuss the concept of evil in greater depth in a future episode when we breach the subject of hell and the world's religions. So, until then, my name is Keith Gill, and I'd like to thank you very much for watching and listening to me, and I hope to see you again. Bye for now.